I'm Vanessa Cole, 36, and for 11 years I believed the man who fixed my coffee every morning was the safest person in my life. Then I grabbed the wrong phone on my way out the door, and by the time my train reached downtown Seattle, I knew exactly how wrong I'd been. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I opened the voice memo app and hit record because I've learned that evidence outlasts emotion, and emotion is exactly what people like my husband are counting on. If you've ever built something with your own hands and watched someone else try to quietly carve pieces off it while smiling at your dinner table, stay with me. This isn't a story about heartbreak. It's a story about an audit. I founded Cold Harbor Diagnostics 9 years ago out of a converted garage in Ballard, back when biotech startup meant 3 grad students and a centrifuge we bought used off a laboratory that was liquidating. Now we occupy 4 floors of a glass tower in South Lake Union. We run clinical partnerships with 2 major hospital systems, and last year we crossed $60 million in revenue. I built that, every square foot of it. My husband, Derek Marsh, 38, works as a senior relationship manager at a regional wealth management firm. It's a real job, a respectable job, and Derek has never once let anyone forget it's a job that involves the word senior. At his parents' house, at holidays, at the country club where his mother insists on hosting Easter brunch, Derek describes what I do as the lab thing, always with a small, indulgent smile, like I run a lemonade stand that got lucky. That Tuesday morning started the way most of our mornings started. Badly, on my end, gracefully on his. My alarm hadn't gone off. I burned my tongue on coffee I drank too fast, spilled a folder of quarterly projections across the kitchen island, and reached for what I thought was my phone, sitting exactly where mine always sits, in a case that matches mine because Derek bought us matching cases as an anniversary gift 8 months ago. Thoughtful, I'd said at the time. Cute, actually, that we'd match. I didn't discover the mistake until I was 2 stops into my commute, and the phone buzzed with an incoming call from a name I recognized instantly. Priya, Derek's younger sister. I almost declined it. I almost texted Derek from my laptop later and let it go. Instead, some instinct acircumflex, call it curiosity, call it the part of me that reviews spreadsheets for a living and has learned to notice when a number doesn't add up, acircumflex made me answer. Priya didn't say hello. She said, "Did the transfer go through yet? Nick Hill's supposed to close on the lease Thursday, and he needs to see it hit the account or the landlord's going to give the unit to someone else." I said nothing. My mouth had gone dry. "And seriously," she went on, "you need to keep Vanessa busy this week. Take her somewhere. Buy her something. Just don't let her anywhere near the Cold Harbor operating accounts until this clears. You know how she gets when she's doing her little monthly reconciliation thing." A pause, then, almost as an afterthought. "Oh, acircumflex and Deja texted me this morning. She needs the deposit for Milo's preschool by Friday, or she's going to call Vanessa directly. You need to get ahead of that." The train rattled into a tunnel. I sat very still, the borrowed phone warm in my palm, and I did the only thing that felt like it belonged to me in that moment. I opened the voice memo app on my own watch and pressed record before I hung up. Derek's passcode was not, in the end, difficult. He is a creature of habit dressed up as a man of complexity, and he had used a version of the same 6 digits since college, acircumflex his father's birth month, followed by the year Derek made VP. I typed it in almost without thinking, and the screen unlocked like it had been waiting for me the whole time. I want to be honest about what happened in the next 20 minutes on that train. I did not sob. I did not feel my chest cave in, not yet. What I felt was the specific, focused calm I get when a clinical trial dataset throws an anomaly, and I have to trace it back through every variable until I find the point where the model broke. I opened his messages. I opened his banking app. I opened, eventually, a folder buried 3 menus deep in his photo library, protected by the same tired passcode, labeled with a bland, forgettable name, acircumflex docs, acircumflex, that told me everything about how little imagination betrayal actually requires. Inside were 211 photographs. A first birthday party. A first day of daycare. A woman named Deja, dark curly hair, laughing at something just off camera, her hand resting on the back of a toddler's high chair. And Derek A. Circumflex my Derek, in a Cold Harbor Charity 5K t-shirt I had printed for our whole executive team, A. Circumflex holding a little boy on his hip, the boy's jaw a soft, unmistakable echo of my husband's own. The boy looked to be about 2.5. Deja had been threatening to call Vanessa about preschool tuition, which meant Derek's second life wasn't a secret to anyone but me. It had a name. It had a school. It had a family who had apparently decided, collectively, that funding it with my company's money was simply a logistics problem to be managed around my little reconciliation thing. The train reached my stop. I locked the screen, slid the phone into my coat pocket, and walked out into the gray Seattle morning with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I have run due diligence on 14 acquisition targets in my career. I know how to find what people try to hide in a balance sheet, and as it turned out, a marriage is not so different from a shell company once you stop assuming good faith. I got to my office, locked the door, and used a data cable I keep in my desk for exactly this kind of unglamorous forensic work, A. Circumflex, usually reserved for offboarding an employee we suspect of IP theft, A. Circumflex, to clone Derek's phone onto an encrypted drive before he even noticed it was missing. He called my cell 40 minutes later, breathless, saying he'd left his phone somewhere and could I check the house. I told him I'd look. I told him I loved him. Then I hung up and kept reading. What I found over the following days was not a single affair. It was an entire financial architecture, built quietly over 3 years, using Cold Harbor's secondary operating account, A. Circumflex, an account I had given Derek limited access to years earlier so he could handle small household vendor payments without bothering my finance team. The structure was almost impressive in its ordinariness. Derek's sister Priya and her husband Nikhil were opening a boutique wellness studio that had, as far as I could tell, no clients, no lease yet signed, and an LLC registered entirely in Nikhil's name, A. Circumflex, with Derek listed as the financial guarantor. $110,000 was scheduled to move from my company into that LLC the moment the wire cleared. Meanwhile, a home equity application had been filed against our house, a house I had purchased outright 4 years before I ever met Derek, using proceeds from Cold Harbor's Series A Circumflex for $400,000, with a signature on it that was, unmistakably, an attempt to forge mine. And buried in his email, a receipt for a $28,000 retainer, paid to a divorce attorney known citywide for aggressive asset seizure. Derek was not simply having an affair. He was executing an exit. Drain the equity, fund his second family's new apartment, prop up his brother-in-law's fictional business, and file for divorce the moment the money cleared, A. Circumflex, betting that I'd be too blindsided, too busy, too in the lab to notice until it was already gone. He had underestimated exactly one thing. He had married someone whose entire career was built on catching exactly this kind of pattern before it became a catastrophe. I didn't confront him. Confrontation would have given him a chance to react, to hide the rest, to lawyer up before I understood the full shape of what he'd built. Instead, 3 days after the train, I walked into the 40th floor office of Renata Ibarra. Renata had spent 9 years as a federal prosecutor in the Western District of Washington before going private, and she took financial fraud personally in a way most defense attorneys don't. I laid the cloned drive, the recording from my watch, and copies of the loan documents on her desk, and watched her go very quiet and very focused, the way I get when a dataset stops making sense until suddenly it does. "Here's the choice in front of you," she said, when she finally looked up. "You can confront him tonight and file for a standard dissolution. Community property law in the state is going to get messy fast, and depending on how good his lawyer is, he may walk away with a real slice of a company you built before you ever met him. Or," she tapped the loan documents once, "you let him finish committing the crime he's already started." If he actually submitted that forged signature to a federally insured lender to draw down the loan, she explained, it stopped being a marital dispute. It became bank fraud. If the $110,000 crossed state lines to reach the LLC, that was wire fraud. If Priya and Nikhil knowingly accepted stolen funds to fund their business, that was money laundering. The moment those wires moved, this stopped being something a family court judge would split down the middle. It became something the Department of Justice would want. But first, Renata said, sliding a binder across the desk, we make sure there's nothing left for him to actually take. Over the next 4 hours, we moved everything. My house went into an irrevocable trust. My 85% ownership stake in Cold Harbor went into the same trust, managed by an independent fiduciary. Every brokerage account, every certificate of deposit, every dollar of liquid capital I controlled personally was restructured until, on paper, I owned almost nothing. If Derek's lawyer came looking for assets to seize, he would find an empty house. I went back to playing my part. It was, without question, the strangest performance of my life, a circumflex kissing my husband goodbye each morning, while a federal case quietly assembled itself in the background. 2 days after my meeting with Renata, the alert came through on my phone at 2:51 in the afternoon. An outbound wire, $110,000, authorized by Derek Marsh, routed to an account belonging to Nick Hills LLC. I did not freeze the account. I did not call the bank to reverse it. Instead, I called my banking relationship officer directly and asked that the account be flagged internally as compromised and placed under monitoring. And I filed a formal referral with the IRS Criminal Investigation Division the same afternoon, laying out the routing details and my suspicion of an unauthorized transfer being laundered through a shell business. I spent that evening doing something I'm not proud of and don't regret. I hired a private investigator named Owen, a soft-spoken former insurance fraud examiner, and gave him a single photograph of Deja pulled from Derek's hidden folder. 2 days later, I had her routine mapped down to the hour, a circumflex, including a standing Thursday visit to a boutique baby furniture store in Fremont. I found her there on a Thursday, dressed like money, and struck up a conversation about a stroller she was admiring. Within 10 minutes, I'd introduced myself as an early-stage investor looking to back women launching lifestyle brands. And within 20, she was telling me, unprompted, glowing with the particular arrogance of someone who has never once imagined the story could end badly for her, that her boyfriend was already taking care of everything. A circumflex, a big commercial finance guy, she said, divorcing his workaholic wife, pulling equity out of the wife's house to get them into a real apartment before the ink on the papers was even dry. She won't even notice, Deja laughed, stirring her latte. She's way too into her spreadsheets. My recorder, sitting in my open tote bag on the table between us, caught every word. Nick Hill's Wellness Studio held its launch event on a Saturday evening at a converted warehouse space in Fremont, the kind of exposed brick venue that costs more to rent for one night than most people's monthly salary. Derek insisted we attend as a couple. Family showing up for family, he told me, straightening his tie in the mirror. It matters to my mom. I wore a dress the color of a stop sign, because some decisions are just correct. The room was full a circumflex investors Priya had courted, half the extended Marsh family, Derek's parents holding court near the bar like visiting royalty, his mother telling anyone who'd listen how proud she was of her hardworking son for carrying this family. A phrase she liked to use pointedly, in my direction, at every gathering for the last 4 years. When Priya took the small stage to make opening remarks, she thanked her brother by name, called him the reason any of this was possible, and then a circumflex catching my eye across the room, unable to resist one final dig a circumflex, added that some people in this family understood the meaning of generosity, and some people didn't. I walked up onto that stage before I'd fully decided to. The room quieted the way rooms do when they sense something has gone off script. I agree completely, I said, taking the microphone from Priya's hand before she'd registered what was happening. Family should be generous. For example, a circumflex, you shouldn't be stingy about telling $110,000 where it actually came from. I watched the color drain out of several faces at once. I told them, calmly, precisely, exactly what I'd found. The forged loan signature, the flagged wire transfer, the federal referral already filed and already under active investigation. I connected my phone to the venue's sound system and played 11 seconds of Priya's voice from that train A circumflex. Did the transfer go through? Keep Vanessa distracted. Don't let her near the accounts A circumflex echoing through a room full of investors who had, until 30 seconds earlier, believed they were watching a respectable young couple launch a respectable young business. Derek didn't deny it. He did something worse A circumflex, he laughed, that particular arrogant laugh he does when he thinks he still holds the better hand, and told me, that it didn't matter, that the loan had already cleared that morning, that his lawyer had already filed for divorce that afternoon, that I was, in his words, about to find out what happens to people who don't pay attention. I paid attention to all of it, I said. The house you tried to mortgage isn't mine anymore. It's held in an irrevocable trust, managed by an independent fiduciary, which means when you forged my name on that loan application, you didn't defraud your wife. You committed federal bank fraud against a protected trust asset. And that $110,000 you wired 2 days ago A circumflex, that account's been under IRS monitoring since the hour it moved. The sirens outside started less than 90 seconds later. Derek was indicted on counts of bank fraud and wire fraud within 6 weeks. He pled to a reduced set of charges rather than face trial and is currently serving a 4-year federal sentence. Nikhil, who knowingly accepted funds he'd been told were family money, without asking too many questions, received 18 months for his role in the laundering scheme. His wellness studio never opened a single class. Priya avoided prison, but not the IRS, which placed a lien against her for unreported income tied to the transfer. She now works retail. Derek's parents spent what remained of their retirement savings trying to keep their children out of prison and lost the fight anyway, along with most of their savings. Deja left the state within a month, taking her son with her. The fantasy of a downtown apartment evaporating the instant Derek's accounts were frozen. I kept the house A circumflex, or rather, the trust kept the house, and eventually I sold it, using the proceeds to fund Cold Harbor's expansion into 2 new hospital networks. We tripled our valuation within the year. The little lab thing, his mother used to joke about, now holds federal research contracts worth more than the entire life Derek tried to steal from me.